Hi, my name is Mike Sklash. I'm a senior hydrogeologist at the Dragan Corporation. Dragan's an environmental consulting firm with offices in the United States and Canada. Got my background on the screen. I've got a PhD in earth sciences from the University of Waterloo. Before that, I have a geological engineering undergraduate degree. I've been consulting for more than 30 years with the Dragan Corporation. And I've been a university professor in my past for the first 15 years. I'm a professional engineer in Canada. I've been an expert witness for the past 30 years, and I've authored papers and been a speaker at conferences. I will be hosting these webinars, 10 tools to help solve your groundwater contamination problem, along with my colleagues, and we'll be discussing a wide range of topics to get to that end point. We'll discuss our philosophy on getting to an effective and cost-effective understanding of groundwater contamination problems so we can move on to the next step. So here we go. So why would you want to listen to Dragan? We've got lots of training and experience with especially with our senior staff. Senior staff, most of them have graduate degrees and more than 20 years of experience. In other words, we've been there, we've done that. Our senior staff have been together for more than 25 to 30 years. We work together combining our unique skill sets and training. For example, Jeff Bolin, who will be giving one of the talks, is an expert in regulatory issues. Matt Schroeder, who's giving another talk, will talk about environmental engineering. Though their expertise allows me to focus on hydrogeology and vice versa. Also, having the senior staff together for so long gives us continuity with projects and clients. We just don't go away, as some of our sites, even though they're closed, don't go away. We're still here to help. We've been working on complicated sites for more than 30 years. The first project I worked on was a landfill project that ended up with a judgment of over $100 million. We all have specialized skills, as I mentioned. Mine is isotope hydrogeology. We've done expert services, such as peer review, for more than 30 years. And we've done site characterization and remediation at complex sites. Some of us have taught at university. As I mentioned before, I taught for 15 years before coming to work. And then, as you can see in this photograph that's up in front of you, this is a 3-day training course we did in Malaysia. That's me on the left in the middle and Jeff Bolin on the right, where we did an intensive course in soil and groundwater remediation. So these are the goals of this webinar series. We'll cover fundamentals through specialized tools. We'll help you to self-evaluate your current and future efforts related to a groundwater problem. What you can expect during these webinars is that we'll share our practical experience and that we'll make each session brief and to the point. So what could be driving a subsurface investigation? There are several possible drivers. One would be environmental site assessments like phase 1 and phase 2 site assessments, which are commonly associated with property transactions to determine whether you have a likelihood of groundwater contamination or other environmental issues. Environmental site assessments can also be the first step in a more intensive site characterization. They tell you where to look, what to look for, and so on. For example, you can tell whether you have a problem, whether you're being sued, whether it has merit. What do I do to go to the next step? Or you already have a remediation system and you want to know why it's costing so much or taking so long. Or it could be a litigation driver. You've been sued for contaminating somebody else's groundwater, or you have somebody else's contaminated groundwater coming onto your property. These are all drivers for subsurface investigations. So in terms of site assessment, phase 1s and 2s are commoditized services. The low price typically wins. So sometimes this could be problematic. Although they're straightforward, I've run into a number of times where the environmental site assessments were done incorrectly at a site. For example, at one site, which was a fuel release, an old fuel tank was not identified in the area where our client was doing remediation because they had the wrong address. The tank turned out to be a second source that complicated the site characterization and cost our client additional money. We identified this by doing a modified phase 1. Another possibility, as an example, another site that I've been involved in is that the environmental site assessment phase 1 didn't look for the right chemicals. And as a result, they had a preconceived idea of what to look for and didn't see the problem. It turned out that the client bought a contaminated property. So even though it's usually low priced, it's kind of buyer beware. Our Vice President, Jeff Boland, will talk about the importance of interviews and site records involved with phase 1s and phase 2. Jeff will share his 30 years plus of experience in that area. Then when we go towards remediation, we often tell people it's all about contact. You need to have contact. If you're digging up soil, you have to contact it with your front end loader or with your backhoe. And any other type of remediation system is the same. You need contact. But that's not the only thing. In order to get a cost-effective solution, you need to understand the site. And the one that I'm going to talk about a little bit is in the two pictures that we have here. Even though the technology was correct, needs to be properly applied. And this is a site where there were waste oil lagoons that were filled and covered. They were covered with a test track as a barrier over the remediation. The test track ended up squeezing out the remnant oil that was still there at the south end, the bottom part of the picture. So the consultant looked at this site and installed a 100-foot cutoff wall, a long cutoff wall that was deep to act as a collection trench, and they piped the oily water to a remediation building that's on the right side of the photograph. Well, it turned out that when we looked at it, the depth of the permeable material was just a bucket or two deep. And you can see in the bottom photograph, that's the depth of the permeable material. When we looked at where the oil was coming out, it was a trickle. It was only the size of a car key coming out. So they built this large test track, built this 100-foot cutoff, and it was all problematic because it was just a small area that if they had done proper site characterization, they would have known that. So when you plan a remediation, you're not envisioning just some of your raw data. You need to envision the big picture. We call this the conceptual site model. And in order to come up with a good remediation, the conceptual site model, which synthesizes everything you know about the geology, the groundwater, and the distribution of chemicals and more, needs to be robust. It needs to be a good understanding of what's going on. And in order to get a good conceptual site model, you require good data and proper interpretation. In sessions 4 and 5, I will introduce the basics of groundwater flow and contaminant transport. And in session 6, Chris Perret will talk about soil logging, monitoring wells, and more. Chris is a hydrogeologist who's been with Dragan for over 25 years. Chris leads our Canadian office, and he's done hundreds of gas station investigation and remediation. So he knows what he's talking about in getting good field data and interpreting it. And then in session 7, Matt Schroeder will talk about high resolution investigative tools. Sometimes you need to go the next step and get more information to get a good CSM. Matt is our senior environmental engineer. Matt's been at Dragan for almost 25 years. He's currently the project manager for a huge characterization, remediation, and litigation effort for a site with multiple plumes in central Kansas. Matt also is involved in numerous other projects, lots of experience in environmental engineering. So when we're dealing with litigation, we use our conceptual site model approach, but we also want to use multiple tools. And what I mean by that is there are different types of data you can use, like groundwater flow, groundwater chemistry, site history, and some of our more advanced techniques like isotopes and soil gas monitoring and so on. But all of that has to fit together internally within the data types and across the data types. We have things like models that we can use, but the models have to represent reality. So everything has to make sense and fit in order to get a robust conceptual site model. And even experts get it wrong. And the figure that's up on this slide shows a site that we worked on where there was fuel releases from a gas station that had a sequence of owners. The gas station is in the yellow circle, and we wanted to allocate responsibility. Who was responsible for what part of the plume which had moved off in the groundwater flow direction? The arrows that you can see on the picture through a residential subdivision. There was free product, gasoline, there was contaminated groundwater. So this was a court case where the other gas station operator, their expert, talked about what I consider an esoteric component of gasoline. It was an additive that only their client had used. And he used that esoteric component to say that his client wasn't responsible because it didn't show up in the residential subdivision. But the problem was that the expert didn't look at the rate at which that esoteric chemical moved relative to other chemicals that we're more interested in from the gasoline release. And in fact, it was significantly slower. So in the end, the esoteric chemical didn't mean anything. Another case that we've been involved in was where a groundwater modeler used the amount of snow instead of the amount of precipitation in a groundwater model. And the amount of snow for those people in snowy areas is about, the height of it is about 10 times greater than the equivalent rainfall. So this groundwater modeler had over-predicted the amount of precipitation by 10 times and had to modify their model to take that into account, and that affects the result. So even when experts are looking at this, you have to make sure that the data makes sense and does it fit with reality. So what we're going to do also for the litigation and for other parts of the site characterization is we're going to get down in the weeds on specialized tools and show you how they can help out or in some cases hurt you. So this is the way that we look at things, and this is what we're going to go through over the next several webinars. We're going to focus on the fundamentals. We're going to consider multiple tools. We'll develop a robust conceptual site model. We're going to ask, does this conceptual site model make sense? And then we'll go on to the next step. Not in these webinars, but we'll be able to choose a remediation that makes sense, that will work, and that will be cost effective, or we'll go into a litigation with an argument or a both robust conceptual site model that is hard to dispute. This is part of a ruling from a court case where I was an expert witness a number of years ago. And when we went into this court case at the beginning, it lasted for 3 weeks. The judge had no background in groundwater contamination issues when she started this case. My testimony, we went through the materials similar to those that we're going to talk about in the webinars. What this did was it allowed the judge to make an educated decision and basically work through the same way that we would like you to work through a problem. So this is what we look at for the webinars that will be coming up, going from conceptual models through traditional parts of groundwater investigations, through more advanced parts, and then putting it all together. We'll present these webinars during the next several months, and you'll be able to find out about them on our website. So if you want to be informed about the subsequent webinars, please sign up and look in our newsletters at dragan.com or dragan.ca, or contact Alan Hahn at ahahn@dragan.com. And if you want to know a little bit more about our peer review services and expert services, take a look at this website, which appears on your screen. And if you want to contact me, that's my email address and phone number there. So thank you for listening in, and hopefully we'll have you visit us again when we're doing the remainder of these webinars. Thanks again.